excited, everyone. I'm Nanne Tolsma, the head of client relations at Intelligence, and I'm your host for this Q&A session about the Acorn program. And I want to start with a little story about when I was a kid. I grew up in a small village in the middle of the forest, and I know this must sound crazy, but we do actually have some forest left in the Netherlands. And every autumn, my parents would ask me to remove the acorns from the garden that fell in from the surrounding trees. And of course, when you don't do that, then the acorns grow very quickly into a small tree, and it will be very difficult to remove. It was a harsh job. I did it every autumn, but it was also nice because I was out in nature, and I would also earn my first pocket money, which was great. My family still lives there, so I go back quite often, and I have to say that I failed miserably because their garden is now full of full-grown oak trees. So whatever we throw at nature, and whenever I tried to eradicate the acorns and the oak trees, in the end, nature perseveres. And I think this is also something that we have to keep in mind, and we should work with nature and not against it. And that is something that we can do through programs like Acorn that we're going to talk about today. I work for Intelligence, and we are a company that provides satellite-based environmental risk and carbon performance solutions. We are a partner of Acorn, but we're not going to talk too much about the technology in this session because there's a great one on that after the break. And that's also why I have with me here today Paul van Balen, Innovation Manager, Wholesale and Retail at Rabobank, who can tell you a lot more about Acorn than I could ever do. So very pleased to have you here with me on stage, Paul. And I would like to give the floor to you to also introduce yourself a bit and tell a bit about your role at Rabobank and the Acorn program.
Okay, thanks a lot, Nanne, and thanks for that very nice introduction. I didn't know you were going to tell that story about acorns. Great, thanks for having me. First of all, it's great to be here today at this event that I think is very relevant for what we are doing at Rabobank and particularly at Acorn. And also great to be here on the stage with you, Nanne, representing Intelligence, an important partner for us in what we are trying to achieve. And of course, always nice to be able to tell the story that we are so passionate about at Rabobank, for this, particularly for this audience. So, about my role at Rabobank, I started at Rabobank 3 years ago, after having worked in consulting for a long time, and I joined the strategy and innovation department. And after 5 months or so, I ran into a couple of guys who had this, what I thought was an amazing idea. So I joined them, and we started to develop that idea further, and that turned into Project Acorn. Within the project now, it's grown quite substantially. I'm head of platform, which means that I'm responsible for the systems that we build to support the whole proposition. And so what we do at Acorn, in a nutshell, is we help smallholder farmers in developing countries to transition from a traditional form of farming practices to agroforestry. And the agroforestry systems, as they grow, of course the trees in those systems grow. And what we do is we measure the carbon stored in the trees, and we turn the sequestered carbon into what we call carbon removal units, each removal unit representing 1 ton of stored CO2. And we sell those units to the voluntary carbon market, to corporates who are seeking to compensate their unavoidable emissions. And the revenues that we generate, they flow back to the smallholder farmers for at least 80%. Can go up to 90%, but at least 80% of that money flows directly back to the individual smallholder farmer.
Yeah, I think that's great. Like, it's not all about nature, but we're also looking at the incomes of smaller farmers and supporting them in their agroforestry practices. I think we have quite a lot of people here which are working on project design, project implementation. So it would also be interesting to hear a bit more detail also about the stakeholders and what their main roles are in Acorn.
Sure. So there's, I would say, three groups of main stakeholders. Of course, it begins with the smallholder farmers. As you probably all know, there's about 500 million smallholder farmers worldwide, and they play a crucial role in large parts of South America, in sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia, in that they provide for themselves, for their families, for the communities that they live in, and that they are an important supplier for the big food corporates. But they also can play a very important role in securing the soil health, biodiversity, etc. And they have a huge potential to store carbon. The problem with many smallholder farmers is that they often practice monoculture. It was also mentioned in the previous session, which has a lot of downsides. I mean, it has some upsides, but it also has a lot of downsides. Typically, it's not good for biodiversity. The yields of the farmers are often not optimal. They're often under pressure from prices. They have less access to a wide variety of nutrition. Crops tend to be susceptible to disease and extreme weather conditions. So all in all, it has a lot of downsides. And science has proven that agroforestry is, in principle, a much better idea. The systems are more resilient to diseases. Biodiversity is helped, and the farmer has access to a wider variety of foods. So all in all, it's a better idea, and it often also generates more revenues for the farmer. And of course, it has the major advantage that it includes the planting of trees, whereas monoculture typically involves deforestation. So yeah, the potential of the carbon sequestration is huge.
Yeah, and I think, or I believe you also work with a lot of local partners on the ground as well.
That's correct, yeah. So
Yeah.
we don't work directly with the smallholder farmers. We typically operate through what we call local partners, often farmer cooperatives or NGOs, that provide us with access to their network of farmers. So I think that's important to mention. And I was telling you about the stakeholder groups that we work with. Of course, on the one side of the equation, we have the smallholder farmers, and on the other side, we have corporates, as I mentioned, who are seeking to compensate for their unavoidable emissions. And what we sell to them is the carbon removal units that represent an ex-post sequestration. So it's not a promise towards the future. The carbon has already been sequestered in the agroforestry systems, and they represent 1 ton, as I mentioned. And the third, main stakeholders is pretty much us. There's the smallholder farmers on the one side, there's the corporates on the other, and we as Acorn, we sit in the middle. What we do is we measure the carbon using satellite technology that you know everything about, and we sell it typically to the corporates that are SBTi listed.
Yeah, great. And as you mentioned also in the introduction, is that you are one of the founders of Acorn, or you joined in quite an early stage.
That's
I think you're now a team of 30, 40 or something like that.
Yeah, if we do not count all of the external people that are also involved in helping us out, that's about the number that we're at right now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's more than we have as a company, but okay, that's confronting. But can you shed a bit more light on that whole process, as you've been there from the start?
Sure. Yeah, so I think things started about 2.5, 3 years ago when the Wholesale and Rural Department of the Rabobank drafted a new innovation strategy. And one of the core concepts of that strategy was that we as Rabobank could play a key role in bringing together parties in the ecosystem that were typically not connected. And so based on that principle, we thought, okay, how can we connect smallholder farmers with their huge potential to corporates? And out of that, the Acorn idea was born. And actually in parallel to drafting that innovation strategy, what happened was that our CEO, Wiebe Dreyer, met with Satya Nadella in Davos in 2019. And as the story goes, they shook hands and they decided, okay, can we join forces to help fight climate change? And then so when the idea for Acorn was born in Rabobank, we reached out to Microsoft and said, hey, we have this idea on our hands. Are you willing to support us in further developing this? And they were very supportive, so we worked together for quite a while to develop that. And yeah, they are still very supportive, and they are the launching customer for us and still an important customer. So yeah, we got a team together at that stage, and we started tackling all of the problems that we saw. And that's pretty much how it started.
Yeah. So yeah, the ID started, let's say, in 2019. I think you built the value proposition quite quickly over time, I would say.
Yeah.
And yeah, we hear, of course, the good sides of the story, but we also would love to hear some of the challenges you faced over time. If you can share that.
Yeah, there have been quite a few actually. So yeah, first of all, I guess it took us a while to convince people inside the Rabobank and also outside that this idea in principle could work. So we would typically get questions like, but yeah, what if the trees burn down, and how are you going to finance these farmers that want to make the transition? And how does that work? Because the trees take a while to actually start sequestering carbon. So what do you do in the first couple of years? And we had to think about all of that stuff, and we had to make some decisions. And once we figured it out, there was one major other challenge, and that was of course getting the remote sensing technology to work, because what we had in mind had not been done before. I mean, there was remote sensing and the measuring of carbon for big pieces of land, or for forests, or for pieces of land that contained a single or a couple of types of trees. But what we wanted to do was measure carbon on tiny plots of land for individual smallholder farmers in developing countries, and that was really completely new. So that was a major challenge. I mean, everything was down to that. If we could get that to work, the proposition would fly, because that would be the answer to, can we make this scalable? Can we make this cost efficient? Can we offer the smallholder farmers access to the market by taking away the monitoring cost and taking away the certification cost? So we had to get that solved.
And I think you also have a nice story about that. Actually.
Yeah. So what we did actually is we reached out to, I think, 7 or 8 parties that we thought, or that said that they could do this, and we gave them a challenge. So what we did, we went out to, I think it was Kenya, I'm not even sure, and we collected on 20 plots of land. We collected the biomass information. So we counted every single tree on those plots of land. We measured the DBH, so the diameter at breast height for all of the trees. We identified the tree species. So we knew how much biomass there was on those 20 plots of land. And what we did is we gave the data for 16 of those plots to those 7 or 8 parties, and we said, okay, we know how much biomass there is on this 4 plots that we haven't given you. So you show us that you can do this. And when the results came in, they were not very promising. Some of the parties were off by a factor 2, some of them were off by a factor 12. So we knew that we weren't there yet. So what we did is we selected 2 or 3 parties that we trusted the most, and we asked them, you say that you can do this, but what's going on here? And they told us, Intelligence was of course one of them, we can do this, but we need truckloads of data to be able to train our models. And so we pretty much called every party in the world to get us this data that we needed to train the models. And we haven't been able to find a party that could deliver that to us. So then we decided, okay, we need to invest heavily in data gathering. So we selected 100 plots of 1 hectare in a particular country. And we, again, went out and collected all of the information for those 100 plots. Truckloads of data, of course. That's what we shared with the 2-3 parties left, and the results were better. And slowly but surely, we reached a point where the accuracy was acceptable, and that's when we knew, okay, we have this nut cracked, and we can get going.
Yeah.
So that was a major challenge, and I think another challenge was to get this working in a banking environment. I mean, the bank has been very supportive of the initiative, but yeah, we are operating in a bank where rules and regulations and compliance and risk and legal, etc., plays a crucial role. So that has been challenging as well. But yeah, so far the proposition has matured to a level where we're now active on the market, and we are really looking forward to scaling this up to the size that we want to go in. And the ambitions that we have, they are great. We are looking to onboard 15 million farmers. And up to now, we are active in, I think, 8 or 10 countries. So we have Kenya, Tanzania, Ivory Coast, Burundi, Ghana, and in South America we have Brazil, Nicaragua, Peru, and I'm probably forgetting a few. And we're also looking to enter into India right now.
Yeah. Yeah, great. I think there is so much potential for scaling there. As you said, there's 500 million smallholder farmers. So
yeah, we don't have them all yet.
No, not yet.
No.
Not yet. No. Taking a step back, because now we talked about Acorn, but I'm sure you also have some insights into the carbon market overall. So what do you see there as the main challenges for the uptake of the market?
Yeah. Well, I am, let's say, confident in scaling up the proposition. I think we're well on our way to do that. But yes, there are challenges in the voluntary carbon market that can play an important role. And what, of course, everybody knows, this market is in full development. So there's continuously popping up new challenges and changes in policy, etc. What we particularly see as a challenge is that there is no clear product quality standard. So, I mean, all of the products out there, all of the carbon credits, they represent 1 ton of CO2. But the story behind it is often very, very different. So there is no clear incentive for buyers, for corporates to pay extra because the product quality is higher. So there's differentiation in terms of compensation versus reduction versus avoidance. There's the ex ante versus ex post difference that I told you about. So what we do is actually already sequestered carbon versus a promise towards the future. There's major differences, of course, in traceability and transparency. I mean, what I think is great about Acorn is that we can really show you on a map. This is where your carbon is stored. This is the farmer behind it. You know his name. You can see his plot of land. You can see over time how the trees have grown. But that's not always the case with all of the carbon credits on the market. So it is difficult to really differentiate and to categorize the product quality. And we're of course hoping that and working on an establishment of product quality standards there. And I think another challenge that we see is that the money doesn't always flow back to the farmers. There's many projects where an initial investment is done and the carbon credits are sold up front, but the price increase of the credits doesn't, it ends up often with the investor rather than to the benefit of the farmer. And I think, that's also a problem that we see. And maybe a third one is the lack of a central meta registry that can avoid the problem of double counting in NDCs and Scope 3 initiatives and on the voluntary carbon market.
Yeah, great. I want to go back a bit to also what you mentioned earlier, and that was related to the scalability part. So, of course, you have big ambitions in terms of that, and technology plays an important role in that. Can you tell a bit more also about the innovative data and other technologies you're using? Of course, also beyond satellite technology, and what do you use them for?
Yeah, so I think the whole concept is pretty much based on data, right? We translate the biomass data that we get from Satelligence and from Space for Good that we also work with, and we translate them to carbon removal units. So data is the basis of everything. And another source of super important data for us is the farmer data. So we go out to the field in every project that we work at, and we have field agents, not from Rabobank, of course, but from the local partners, and they collect the farmer data for us. And what we've seen so far is that it's difficult to really capture high quality, accurate data. So what we have seen so far is polygons, the GPS strings that describe the border of a plot of land, that they overlap, for example, or that they don't make any sense. So what we've said is, okay, we need to improve on this. So we're about to launch our own application allowing field agents to simply take a mobile device, walk around the plot, capture the information of the farmer in an accurate and correct way, and then collect all of the other information that we need from the farmers, get their consent, and make sure that we're good to go. So that's also very important for us. But of course, the most important piece of data is the remote sensing technology.
Yeah, and I also want to pitch in a bit on that and the role that plays. So indeed, we work with the farmer location data that we get through the partners. And there's basically two things that we use the satellite data for. So the first thing is do an eligibility check. So we look at all these farms locations and see whether deforestation has happened in the past or not at these farms. And I think this also important to note is that when we do detect deforestation, it doesn't mean that a farmer is directly excluded from the program, but again, the same field teams can then go on the ground to check, okay, what has happened? Why do we see deforestation happening at that farm? And of course, the second is the ongoing monitoring. So where we set a baseline date and look at the change over time, how does the growth of the agroforestry practices translate into an increase in carbon, and these can then be sold through the program. The approach that we take, it's based then on a lot of ground truth data, as you also mentioned, Paul, and it follows the Acorn framework, and that's a framework that's approved by Plan Vivo, who also carry out the verification. And also for additional trust and reliability, we also work on certification of the data pipeline. I got the call that we're almost out of time, so I want to move to the last question.
Yeah.
And I think there was a question before about online, about corporates as well. And yeah, how can actually corporates that are here in the room and are interested, how can they buy your carbon credit?
Yeah, I just saw the question on the screen there that also ties into that a little bit. Well, the sales that we've done so far was based on a bilateral transaction, but we're actually organizing an auction in November, on November 8th, and anyone who is interested in buying the carbon removal units from Acorn, can take part in this auction. To address the question that was just raised, there's a minimum price of 20 euros during that auction and a minimum size of 1,000 carbon removal units. Yeah, so we're doing that together with a law firm, DLA Piper, to make sure that everything is done correctly. And the reason why we're doing this in an auction, there's actually a couple of reasons. So what we see is that the price on the market is very volatile. And what we want to make sure is that we are, creating a price that we can take forward, so that we know, okay, this is a fair price, and what we're actually doing during the auction is that we're cutting out the how do you say that, the anomalies, the lower and upper prices, and make sure that everybody pays a fair price. And of course, what we're also trying to do is we're trying to maximize the price for the farmers, because most of the revenues flow back to the farmer. So yeah, everybody, you're more than welcome to look at our website, and if you want to participate in the auction, that would be absolutely great.
Yeah, looking forward to the results of that as well. It's going to be exciting. We start at 5 minutes late, so I'm just going to get 2 questions from the audience. And I see one in the back there. Please go ahead.
Yeah, my question, I guess, is more for land managers rather than investors or buyers. There are quite a few startups in this space, and I'm just wondering if we had, on the panel, if we had everyone gathered to make their own business case, how would we, what makes, I guess, Acorn as a platform, stand out against the rest? And from the land manager perspective, why would you commit to being involved with one platform over another? And then I guess the extension question from that would be, what about the marketplace means that land managers can't go directly to corporates through kind of bespoke agreements? I guess essentially what's the need for going onto the marketplace?
Okay, there's a lot of questions in
Yeah.
one question. So to take it from the top, what sets Acorn apart from other startups? I think a couple of things. I mean, Acorn is initiated by Rabobank. Rabobank is typically, a very strong player in the food and agri market, not just in the Netherlands, but also in Africa, South America. So we have a very, very large network of local partners that we can tap into, which would typically be more difficult for another startup. So another element of your question was the land management, and why would a party want to not go directly to the corporates? Well, I think what sets us apart there is that again, 80% of the revenues flow back directly to the farmer. So what we're really in this for is to not only generate money for ourselves and for the local partners, but particularly for the smallholder farmers. I think that's very unique to our product. And I think the local partners going directly to a corporate, that's in practice not really feasible, I would say. It is the technology that we have developed together with Intelligence that makes the monitoring and the certification costs so low that it's actually, that is crucial. And if you want to do that independently, it's really difficult because the monitoring would be very expensive for smallholder farmers. Certification would be very difficult to obtain by yourself. So I think those are some of the elements that set Rabobank and Acorn apart from other players.
Yeah, thanks for that, Paul. And I think I'll take the last question here in front. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Michel Schuurman, 35. Thanks for the presentation, very insightful. I'm trying to bridge a gap in my head from the previous presentation in which also Ivory Coast came as an example. When the on-the-ground challenges of getting land use rights correctly, getting the money to the smallholder farmers, so the practicalities of working on the ground. How have you got this covered within Acorn?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I haven't seen the previous, just the last couple of minutes to be honest, so I don't know exactly what was discussed there. But maybe I haven't emphasized this enough, but much of the work that we do is done by the local partners. So when we start a cooperation with a local partner, for example, Solidaridad in South America and in Africa, 1 Acre Fund that we work with, Caderes in Africa, we select them and we talk about, do you have the capacity, the capabilities, the knowledge, the expertise, etc., to implement this project with your farmers. So much of the work is done by the local partners. We oversee it, we help them, etc., but much of that work is done there. And about the payout to the farmers, that is a challenge, absolutely. It's one of the challenges that we need to solve. So what we do now is we pay out through the local partners, and they have the responsibility to then pay out the farmers in their network. It's difficult to trace, has that money in fact been paid out to each and every individual farmer? So we check that on a sample base. So we select farmers in the database and check have they actually received the right amount of money. But that is a challenge. I agree to that. And what we are now thinking about is, okay, can we can we optimize that process? Can we use payment solutions like M-Pesa or MasterCard has solutions to make that even more traceable and be absolutely sure that the money ends up on the right place? And of course, as a bank, we need to be absolutely certain of that because we need to make super certain that we are not financing something that we don't want to finance. So yeah, that's very important to us.
Great, thanks. I saw that we received a bonus question, so please go ahead.
Lucky for me.
Yeah.
Paul Chatterton. Paul, congratulations. This is really quite revolutionary what you guys are doing.
Thank you.
And as the world's largest agricultural bank, you know how to provide benefit to farmers. So I guess the challenge that I'd like to hear how you're dealing with is this carbon is owned by the farmers, it's owned by the landowners, you're helping them to sell that. What are the principles you apply to maximise the benefit back to the farmers and to get some profit for yourself as you're building this system? How do you balance that?
So is your question, how do we make sure that the biomass increases as much as possible? No.
No, how do you make sure that the farmer gets the best value for their carbon? And obviously you have a business costs to cover in that. But I imagine as a global bank that's very used to bringing value back to farmers, you have some very clear principles on that.
Yeah. So as I said, I think the most important thing to mention here is that we've said a minimum of 80% that we generate from the sale of the units flows back to the farmer. That leaves 20%. 10% is typically to cover for the cost that the local partner makes for all of the activities that we've just talked about, and then there's 10% for us because we've also heavily invested into this. And how do we optimize? Of course, the trick is that we get the best price for the carbon removed unit on the market. What we do see is that we expect the prices to increase over time, and we're working in all sorts of ways to emphasize the quality of our credits and all of the other benefits that it offers to farmers besides only the carbon storage. And we are looking for corporates who can appreciate that, who understand the quality of the product and are willing to pay this additional price. And mechanisms such as the auction that we've talked about is very important for us to make sure that we have the right price going forward for farmers. So yeah, a set of principles. To be honest, I'm not really sure what you mean with that, but I think all of the rules that we have defined for ourselves, all of the stuff that we want to abide by, that we want to ensure, is all covered in the methodology and the framework that was mentioned by Nana already. It's available on the website. I think it's a very interesting piece of to read what we set out to do and what. I think those are the principles that you're looking for. A bit too much to talk about right now. But
yeah, we can discuss also further in the coffee break, of course. And thanks a lot, everyone, for listening. Thanks a lot, Paul. And
thank you again for
appreciate
having
it.
us. Yeah.